The origins of voodoo are uncertain. However, it's a general belief that it comes from Western Africa. That being said, it seems to come up again and again, and sometimes frightening, almost horror-like background in histories and films. Hundreds of accounts of TV and silver screen legends. We are going to dive in and explore a little bit of the history of voodoo.
That voodoo that you do so well.
Ooh, voodoo.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So one thing I want to say before we delve too deeply into the topic of voodoo. One, I want to say we both respect that it is a recognized religion, so we don't want to...
Absolutely.
We don't want to feel like we're insulting any practitioners.
That is not our intent at all.
I think we're trying to present some information, and it's never our intent to insult or anything like that. So we do take it very seriously. We're not trying to insult anybody. Secondly, I want to say we're probably going to screw up some pronunciations.
Absolutely.
And we do understand that voodoo is not the absolute name for some of these things.
Yes.
But we're going to say voodoo because it works better for us.
We're going to take a very novice, unprofessional
Yes.
Attempt to explain some of the practices of voodoo.
But some of the things as they're represented can be a little chilling, a little unsettling to those people who are unfamiliar
Absolutely.
with voodoo.
Absolutely. Well said. I think it's an accepted belief that voodoo, which has evolved through the decades and even centuries, originates from somewhere in Western Africa. In particular, it seems to come up with an area called Benin in Africa. The word voodoo itself means spirit in the local Fon language of Africa. And the foundations of the religion and practice stems from ancient traditions and essentially worshiping with associated ancestors with the utmost, deepest respect. Honestly, you strip away all the glamour, if you will, of horror films and all of that. At this point in time, this is a very humble religion in my belief. Very traditional in the fact with some Spanish and other religions. Very honorable to ancestors who have passed upon before us, and the belief that you can learn from their mistakes and that they would be friendly and come forward from the dead and share information and help you. Come on, that's big. That's huge.
Well, I think what a lot of people consider voodoo, what we would call voodoo now, is it developed in Haiti between the 16th and 19th centuries, and it was arose from the combining of traditional religions of Western Africa with the slave trade and those of Roman Catholicism, and like you said, focused on the veneration of what they call the Loa, which are ancestor spirits.
Spirits, basically.
So it is very much about focused on your ancestors, and they become spiritual powers unto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and they're there to guide, as any ancestor, especially father, mother figure, grandparent figure would be, wanting the best for their family and the followers. I kind of imagine it as this giant tree, with that being the foundation. And then, as you stated, somewhere between the 16th and 19th century, with the whole slave trade and everything, the branch kind of veers dramatically off. And when African slaves were brought into America to work on the plantations and such, they obviously brought voodoo with them, their religion, their beliefs, as anyone would. And their white masters in the Americas, however, had their own plans regarding and the religious practices of the slaves. And actually in 1685, there was a law that prohibited the practice of African religions entirely.
And that may have been what spurred the incorporating Roman Catholicism. So
Force-feeding that, basically.
It's sort of similar to, was it the Brazilian, well, kind of a comparison would be the Brazilian martial art of capoeira, which is a dance-based martial arts system, because the masters, the people in charge at that point in time, outlawed, official training in combat and martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so they hid it within their traditional dances.
It has to go underground, basically, yeah. And the masters, the slave masters and stuff, as you said, they basically push this Christianizing of the slaves, and they actually had in the law that you had 8 days from the time that you, say, arrived from Haiti as a slave. You had 8 days to convert the slave to Christianity, basically. These people are a proud people. They had this religion. It's their ancestry. You're asking them to cut ties and basically say this doesn't exist. So as you stated, we're force-feeding Christianity. The Catholic religion basically kind of becomes in. And so they find a way to adapt and kind of melt this all together. And that's where I think a lot of it gets confusing, but very interesting.
Well, you have this, I don't want to say romanticized, but definitely this Hollywood version of voodoo that is all dark and evil and for bad purposes,
mm-hmm.
which is not what voodoo is all about.
No. It's kind of like, and I hate to even go this far, but like the whole vampire craze with the silver screen. They've romanticized a lot of this. I'm not saying there's not some good versions out there, but a lot of it's more over the top. Now, I will say, if you've watched American Horror Story, The Coven, I think that was season 3 or season 4, that takes place in New Orleans.
I think that actually came up in some of my research on the Loas.
It's a lot of good references, in my opinion. You've got, obviously, Marie Laveau is in the show. Papa Legba, who we're going to talk about here a little bit later. One of the things I found in my research with the show, and they always said that the producers of American Horror Story do a lot of research, and they try to put in little Easter eggs, if you will. One of the things I thought was interesting is Marie Laveau actually was a type of what we would consider a beautician today, hairdresser, and in the show they put that in there, even though it was a little bit more modern age, recreated Marie Laveau. She actually had a hairdressing salon. Little tidbits like that I thought was pretty interesting. But yeah, they've romanticized it, but they've almost taken it over the top to a point where it is extremely scary. And that being said, I think with any religion, it should be, as we stated, very respected and honored. And a lot of people will tell you, you don't go into any religion, especially this one, being light of heart. You better know what you're doing, because it's kind of like whatever your beliefs may be, spirit boards or whatever. If you don't understand what you're doing, it would be easily to get thrown off kilter, and who knows what could happen.
We've talked about the Loas, so I want to touch on that a little bit. We can explain what that is, but they pop up in Haitian and Louisiana voodoo, often referred to as the Mysteries or the Invisibles. The Loas act as intermediaries between Bondi, which would be French for the good God, which the practitioners view as the supreme creator who lives at a distance from humanity. The Loas act as an intermediary between Bondi and humanity. They are not prayed to, like you'd see in a lot of other religions, but they are more like serve them, offer them offerings, mm-hmm. respect them. Each Loa has a very distinct personality, their likes and their dislikes, their appearance,
mm-hmm.
the things that they are responsible for.
Right.
They are specifically not deities, though. They are ancestor spirits. Now, practitioners typically participate in an initiation ritual that involves meeting in a temple run by priests known as Hungans. And again, I'm going to say, we're probably going to get some
butcher a few words, yeah. Bear with us.
Or priestess known as Mambos, and they venerate the Loas. One of the central rituals involves drumming, singing, and dancing to encourage possession by one of the Loa. Through this possession, practitioners believe they can communicate directly with the Loas. So they'll make offerings of fruit, blood of sacrificed animals, things like that. It sounds a lot grim. Again, you talk about sacrifice, that always kind of throws a flag up in some people's minds, but they do it with the utmost of respect.
It does, but yes, if you strip away the stigmata of it, let's face it, blood is the direct source to life and the direct tie to a lot of that. That's where a lot of that comes from.
And modern practitioners of voodoo are primarily found in Haiti, although we do have communities in other parts of the Americas. And as Americans, we definitely think of New Orleans when we think
absolutely.
of voodoo. It has faced much opposition and criticism throughout its history, and voodoo is repeatedly described as one of the world's most misunderstood religions.
And I think a lot of that is because it's kind of a melting pot. It has evolved and had to evolve under pressure so many times through the generations.
And again, I think, you talk about a religion that has sacrifice and the like, the repressed European mindset, you're definitely going to look down on that. And especially when you consider the origins from West Africa, I can see, historically speaking, why people would want to shy away and shun practitioners.
It's human instinct. What we don't understand, we often shun away or fear or, post a stigmata against. But you also have to remember, as we were saying, when the slavery trade was really big between the 14th and 16th century, the slaves were being brought to America. They were being force-fed Christianity. They were trying to embed to keep their ways alive, maybe masked, to a point where I found references. Many of the Catholic saints were actually identified with traditional voodoo spirits, taking a double meaning, kind of.
A lot of them are rolled in with the Loa.
St. Peter is actually recognized as Papa Legba, which, again, the name comes up as the gatekeeper to the spirit world. And while St. Patrick is associated with another god, I believe, and I will butcher this, Dumlala, the snake god or spirit. Now, Papa Legba, we'd mentioned a little bit, he's, I think, a very interesting Loa or spirit in the religion. His origin story comes from the Fawn people of the Dahomey, Africa area, and he is the guardian trickster of the gates of all crossroads. And as it was explained in a couple interviews that I was watching, imagine every highway, every road, whether it be a country gravel road to an interstate, to railroad tracks, any type of road, he would be in control of. So anything that flows, he's going to know about. That's his prominence. That's his territory.
He stands at the spiritual crossroads. And he's also, he gives or denies permission to speak with the spirits of the dead. Facilitates communication, speech, and understanding. Part of his trickster nature is that he does love riddles. And no one can speak to spirits without first giving him an offering.
Right.
He is very much about the communication with the dead.
He's often depicted as being wearing skull makeup, smoking a cigar, top hat. As you said, very prankster-ish, almost kind of Loki in another religion, or like a genie would be. You have to be very specific with your requests, because with him being the trickster nature, he'll try to turn that against and use that to teach you lessons.
He oftentimes is represented as carrying a cane, with that cane representing the gateway between the human world and the heavens. We talked about offerings. He's especially fond of coffee or cane syrup, but sometimes just simply acknowledging him and asking him to open that door of communication is enough. Again, he's sort of fickle and trickstery. Now, one of the versions, you mentioned something about a top hat. There are other versions that have him wearing a broad-brimmed straw hat and smoking a pipe, which your description kind of crosses over a little bit into Baron Samedi.
With the Baron Samedi.
Which I think we'll cover here in a moment.
Which often kind of fade across. If you don't really understand the differences, they can seem to be very similar.
Now, Papa Legba has popped up in popular culture, so if you're familiar with Neil Gaiman's American Gods, Terry Pratchett's Witches Abroad, and of course the series American Horror Story.
The Coven. Now, one of the things I came across is the different Loas also, if you dig into it, are associated with different traits, as you said, different responsibilities, but also they're given a special day. Papa Legba, for example, is associated with Mondays. So if you were a practitioner, it would be best if you were utilizing him, or maybe I should say if he picked you. That's one of the things in the religion, is you don't just necessarily go out and pick your loa. They're all very different, and often they will pick you. But you would probably have the best luck with Papa Legba doing sacrifices, doing offerings, trying to summon him on a Monday, where the Baron, as we mentioned, he is associated with Saturday. So obviously, to get the best results on that, you would contact him on Saturdays. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, since we're bearing over to the Baron, Baron Samedi is a Loa of the dead, typically depicted wearing a top hat, black tailcoat, dark glasses, with cotton plugs in his nostrils. This resembles the Haitian burial preparations. So he looks like a man prepped for burial. Frequently depicted as either a skeleton or a man with skeletal face paint.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that depiction of that character. The villain in Disney's Princess and the Frog is
Right.
very, heavily inspired by the Baron.
Right.
He's noted for disruption, obscenity, debauchery, and having a fondness for tobacco and rum. So he's
often drunk.
Yeah.
This is where in a lot of the practices you may see they'll take in rum or alcohol and spew it out, and a very flamboyant party person, if you will.
Now, the Baron is the only one of the Loas that can accept an individual into the realms of the dead, and spends most time in the realm of voodoo spirits, which there's a name for that I, again, would butcher if I tried to read it. He's notorious for his outrageous behavior, like I said a moment ago, swearing continuously, making filthy jokes to the other spirits and at their expense. And he's married to another powerful voodoo Loa, Mammon Bridget. She is also a death Loa, who's also considered to be the only Loa that originates from Ireland.
That totally threw me over the cliff. I had to read that 2 or 3 times to make sure I was reading it correctly.
Now, she cares for the dead more than they were ever cared for while they were alive, is one of her traits, and always respects those who respect the dead. Now, true to form, Baron Samedi, though married to Bridget, he often tends to chase after mortal women when they catch his fancy.
Very Zeus-like.
Now, he will often be found at the crossroads between the worlds of the dead and the living. He'll make deals with mortals who want his power, or that he takes a fancy to. He's also seen as a Loa of resurrection and of life. He's a giver of life. Can cure mortals of their diseases and their wounds as long as he thinks it's worth his time. And it's one of his main responsibilities is to ensure that corpses rot in the ground, to stop them from coming back as zombies. Which, again, is one of the things very much associated with voodoo. I came across some research, and this goes back over to the Africa area. There is actually what they call zombie dust. This is factual. Unsure what makes up zombie dust, and quite honestly, it seems to vary from tribes. Now, I know one particular story I heard involved, was it pufferfish?
Yes.
Poison, fugu?
Yes. I think it's probably whatever they have, at their access, but some form of the zombie dust is a powdered form of whatever concoctions, and it is blown into the face of the victim, and it seems to be, I can't think of any other way to explain this, but it is definitely more of an aggressive act. This is not the docile type that we were talking about, but people who might oppose the religion of voodoo, resist it.
We talked about Houngans and Mambos as the priests and priestesses of voodoo. Typically, zombies would be reanimated by a Bokor, or like a dark practitioner of voodoo.
Yes,
this is the person,
black magic,
this
the dark
is the person
magic
you turn to when you want to curse or something like that.
In the research, they would blow this zombie dust like into the face of the victim, and they would immediately fall sick or possibly even pass out and fiend death. Basically, people would think they were dead. The dark magic practitioners then would arrange to have them buried.
Yep.
And then within a set specific amount of time, they would be dug up because obviously they are still alive, but severe brain damage and trauma would occur if nothing else, just from the stress of being buried alive, but
Yeah.
from whatever concoctions they inhaled.
At that point, they're supposed to be under the complete control of the Bokor as
Yes.
a personal slave with no will of their own.
And it's kind of like you've done permanent brain damage to this person, and yeah, they might have been an unbeliever, they may have opposed the religion, resented it, but now they're basically full-blown followers that don't question anything, mindless zombies to every aspect of the definition, and would be inducted basically into the cult, if you will.
Now, something I found interesting in my research here is reference to the incorporeal zombie, or the zombie astral. And that's when a Bokor captures a part of the human soul to enhance his spiritual power, which he can take what they call the zombie astral and seal it away in a bottle, and then the Bokor could either keep that or he could sell it to someone, and they could use that for prosperity, good luck, fortune and business. But eventually it was believed that God would come back to reclaim that soul. So the zombie astral was a temporary good luck charm, if you will.
Huh.
And the two types of zombie reflect what they call the soul dualism present in Voodoo, which is that you have the soul of you have the soul of the flesh and the soul of the spirit. So the physical zombie, the one that comes up from the grave, is a body missing spirit, and then the zombie astral is a spirit missing its body.
Okay.
So it represents that duality that they say is part of Voodoo.
Gotcha. Now, another figure I think we have to talk about when you talk about Voodoo, especially the New Orleans lore, is Marie Laveau. Probably one of the best known, at least in the American version, of the practitioner or religion of Voodoo. Now, she created quite a following. She was even depicted and given the title as the Queen of Voodoo. Still to this day, her grave is decorated, adorned. People leave offerings. Often they will use the symbol of an X that they will put on her crypt, and that would be like a wish that they had asked, a favor that they had asked. And then the belief is the person, if they got their wish granted or she helped them from the dead, they would come back and circle the X. So it's kind of a living monument, if you will, of her powers and her being able to help the followers. Now, she also came up with one of her creations, and I will probably butcher this, but gris-gris bags. They're kind of a red bag or a pouch. They usually have a mix of herbs or items that are considered blessed by a voodoo priest or priestess. So if you go to New Orleans, you might come across these and may not know the purpose of them, but it's typically depicted as like a red velvet bag, a small pouch. And that would be something that you would leave an offering or purchase, and that would be good luck, a good luck piece. So a lucky rabbit's foot, if you will. Marie Laveau, obviously New Orleans' most infamous or famous voodoo practitioner. And in a lot of the practices, kind of as I dove in or went down the rabbit hole to investigate, to summon or to speak to a lot of these loas or death spirits, you would go to a doorway inside of a house, a building, and a voodoo priest or priestess might help you with some candles and some offerings as you try to make contact.
I did stumble upon something. New Orleans voodoo practitioners, there's supposedly 7 portals to the spirit realm.
Okay.
And practitioners of voodoo in New Orleans supposedly believe that these 7 portals are physical locations in the city of New Orleans.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, one of the practices as you enter any building, you are to knock on the door, whether anyone's there or not. And that is a sign of respect to the spirits that live or reside in that building. But getting back to the doorway aspect, candles are lit, offerings are made. If you are asking to communicate with someone from the dead, you are to go reverse and step through the doorway backwards. And you might say, well, now, why is that? Because spirits are often associated with mirrors, so it's a reverse image. And by you walking backwards through the doorway, that is almost like you are accepting that and you're immersing yourself, stepping back into their realm, if you will. I thought that was interesting.
Now, I will say that when we talked about doing a voodoo episode. My interest in voodoo actually started a very long time ago, in my teenage years. We talk of voodoo pops up quite often in pop culture and the like. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there was a video game series called Gabriel Knight.
I have not.
The first one was called Sins of the Fathers, and it features the character Gabriel Knight, a struggling novelist who was working with the police in New Orleans to help solve the quote-unquote voodoo murders. Now, in the original game, a little bit of trivia, he was voiced by Tim Curry, and then the likes of Mark Hamill and whatnot did voices. But this was a point-and-click adventure game, like your King's Quest or something like that. When we were playing this game, I didn't have a lot of patience for point-and-click adventure games. I was more of a Doom, Castle Wolfenstein kind of guy. But if you look through the book, it had a list of books that were inspiration for the game. And one of those books was called Spirits of the Night, the Vaudoon Gods of Haiti. Whether you believe in coincidence, kismet, however you want to phrase it, I joined a book club in my early, or late teens when I started working, and one of the first catalogs I got had that exact book in it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Uncanny. So I immediately ordered it, read through it, of course, learned, voodoo learned a lot about voodoo, with the Loas being a form of ancestor worship and things like that. So I had actually done a lot of reading. Well, I would say a lot of reading. I've read at least one book on voodoo before we got here. But it definitely, when we do any topic on this show, if you can find a book that'll talk about it, it's going to go way more in depth than we do. We're just scratching the surface.
Very much, yeah.
But like that particular book, I think it went page by page describing different Loas and their realms of influence and how to, give what offerings to give them. And
there are hundreds.
Yeah, and they each have their own customized symbol to represent them that you would use if you were going to make an altar or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Here you have this video game that just kind of popped up out of the blue, and I see one book title, and then
boom, boom.
Months later, a year later, whatever, I see that book pop up. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And again, that's how most of my education in these topics, I find a book and I just find it interesting. And that book, I'll admit, is a very dry read. It's
it's more of a research
more
book.
of an academic text,
yeah,
but it's still very interesting if you have an interest in this kind of thing. I'm not sure if that book can still be found, but I'm sure there are dozens of other books at least that are very similar, right, if you wanted to dig into it a little deeper.
One of the things I did come across, trying to find something more up to date, a little bit more on the edgy side, and I didn't have to look too far. I actually found there was a young lady, 19 years of age. Her name was Kat Reston of the Virginia Beach area. And she and her girlfriend had been together for, it sounded like, a period of time and had broken up. And her girlfriend, who I did not catch her name, was a practitioner of voodoo. And so the scorned Kat Reston, for whatever reason, decided she wanted to use voodoo and try to ask the spirits to get the two of them back together. Now, this occurred April 29th of this year, of 2020, so very, very recent. Newspaper articles carried it. You can find it quite easily on the net. Again, it's the Virginia Beach area. But she had supposedly burned a voodoo doll, which, again, that's kind of a stereotypical you associate with voodoo as a pincushion doll. But she had burned a voodoo doll in attempts to summon what was being called as Papa Legba. And we've talked a little bit about Papa Legba. I was
going to say, just from what we've discussed, Papa Legba would be the wrong person to talk
exactly.
to. Unless the girlfriend had passed away.
No, she has not. That was my belief. But it's what happened next. She did this. She didn't think anything happened. And again, from what I understood, she herself was not a voodoo practitioner. She just kind of dove into it. She did ask around on some things, and she was told, like I mentioned earlier, with any religion or with anything you do, if you don't know what you're doing, do your research. Don't just jump off of a cliff. But within, I believe it was 2 days after this event, they found her body dead. And they proclaimed it as unknown reasoning. Now later, a full-blown autopsy was required. The family didn't want an autopsy at first, as I understood it. She was found in a bathtub and apparently had a heart attack. Now, 19 years old, seemingly
That's mighty early for a heart
healthy young lady in a bath, which is generally relaxing, passes away 2 days after this. And, of course, the newspapers ran with this. And literally, like, one of the titles was Papa Legba kills voodoo practitioner. I mean, it was...
But again, you know, just from
doesn't
what we talked
add
about here,
up.
Papa Legba would not have been the guy to do that.
Does not add up at all.
But, you know, maybe, I mean, she's meddling in things she doesn't understand. She's maybe opening doors she doesn't intend to open. So.
Right. Now, some people did speculate possibly it was the Baron. Again, Papa Legba and the Baron seem to kind of fade in and out, kind of gray areas, especially with the Hollywood aspect of it. He is the keeper and decides who comes basically through the gates of death and who comes through and who communicates. So some of the voodoo practitioners in the area actually kind of rose up and they're like, this is not Papa Legba. We know Papa Legba, and this is not his style. This could be the Baron, or she summoned something totally unbeknown that she didn't know what she was getting into. But, you know, it's this type of stigmata that's often associated with it and, you know, puts panic and terror into the eyes and ears of people out there. New Orleans is steeped with mystery and lore. When you go down there, and I know you and your family have visited New Orleans. I have yet to make the trip. I want to very much.
One of the things I insisted upon when visiting New Orleans is that I wanted to be at least exposed to the voodoo culture. And I know there's a shop. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of that shop. It probably would take just a couple of minutes to look it up. But my brother-in-law knew where it was. He was taking us there. We were looking for it. And I will say, just strangely enough, as we're looking for this particular shop, and we're not talking about what we're looking for, he's like, oh, I know where we're going. He starts leading us through. And we run into a young lady sitting on a street corner, and she looks at my brother-in-law as we're walking by, and she goes, hey, if you're going to that shop, like anything you buy, bring back to me. I'll take the curse off of it.
Oh.
And again, we didn't tell her where, like, she didn't know where we were going.
Right.
So
Total strangers.
Weird.
Yep.
Now, I will say, since I've been to the shop, I believe the movie is Hatchet 2. There's a scene where they go into a voodoo shop. The front door is the shop that I went to.
Okay.
The exterior shot. Now, the inside shot's a lot bigger than the place I actually went to. So
right.
There's some movie magic there. But it is a real place, and when you go in, it is everything you expect it to be. If, you know, looking at a voodoo
fully
shop.
immersed into it. Yep.
A lot of little statues, a lot of, I don't know if fetish is the right word, but a little, you know, I mean, they has all these different things.
And I've been told in a lot of those shops they have actual working altars
there's an
to
altar
the different
there,
loas.
and with a big sign that, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, please do not touch.
Right.
But there is an altar in the back, and it's very interesting shop to just look around, even if you're not into that.
Yeah, that's one of the things my wife and I, again, we just kind of want to experience that. Definitely want to go to the French Quarter. And while I'm not a practitioner, obviously, I the history aspect of me, I think I've mentioned that several times. I love the history aspect. I want to see Marie Laveau's grave. I want to kind of take in some of that. There's a lot of history there. Now, I did hear, on kind of a negative note, that unfortunately some of the cemeteries are a little unsafe to be in, not because of the dead or the undead, but kind of some of the drugs and some different things, the crime.
Unfortunately, that's probably the case.
So
you definitely don't want to be there at the wrong time of day.
It may have been you. Somebody had told me that if you do make that trip, it would be much safer and well worth the money spent to join one of the tours to go through the cemetery, because for whatever's going on there, the tours seem to be kind of safe. I don't know if part of the money is going to somebody to say, hey, we're allowed to be here this day and this time or whatever.
Our trip to New Orleans was just the little touristy part, and then, you know, we came home. We didn't spend a lot of time there. We didn't do a lot of tours. We were sort of limited on the amount of time we had to spend there. So
now I got to ask, did you pick up any books or anything for research?
I did not.
You just went visually, took it in, and said, I'm walking away.
Yeah, no, I went in the shop and I looked around and I saw the stuff and I realized, one, and this goes back to the very first thing that we said after the intro, out of respect, right. I knew that these were not, like, I didn't need to buy anything there. That wasn't for me.
That wasn't you.
It didn't feel like, to me, it felt disrespectful.
Right.
And in a
That's
way,
fair enough.
and I'm not trying to say that to try to, I'm not trying to impress anybody or anything. It just,
Right.
I went in there, I looked at the things, and it was interesting, but it definitely wasn't my culture. It wasn't, it felt wrong to want to buy anything. So.
Right. Well, I mean, whenever you're visiting different states or whatever, different chapels and different things, you might go in and take it in. But yeah, I mean, out of hopefully respect, and everybody would have this belief, it's not your deal, but you still have to respect the history. And again, voodoo, like I said, I imagine this giant tree and the roots and the foundation were, very pure, docile. And then, unfortunately, with the whole slavery ordeal with the 14th through 16th century, these people were just dragged away from their homes and separated, brothers and sisters separated, the families were separated. That would be horrific. So you're going to cling to anything that you can. And obviously, I think it would stand to reason you'd reach out to your ancestors and ask them for help at that point in time, if no other time. And then you arrive in America and there's laws and you have 8 days to basically be purified and, washed away with Christianity. You're having to take your beliefs and religion and try to keep them alive. It would be horrible.
Well, if colonial America was good at anything, it was trying to tell everybody they all needed to be the same.
Right, brainwashing, definitely.
And yeah, when you have that culture stripped away from you,
I think that is going to have some animosity and some negative vibes because of the way it had to be rebirthed. And again, the history part of me, I find all that just fascinating.
Well, and as we get ready to wrap up here, I do want to reiterate, we're not trying to assume that we understand what that's like. We
not at all.
We mean no disrespect at all. We found this to be an interesting topic. A lot of people, I think, would consider voodoo, scary and all that. But when you do just cursory research at all, voodoo's not scary.
No,
this is a
Truly
religion
not.
like any other religion. It has its beliefs. Is there good and bad? Yes.
There's good and bad in
good
everything.
and bad in everything.
Absolutely.
All of humanity, So, when you have your Hunguns that are the, practitioners, then you have your Bokors, which they look at as like evil practitioners. But that duality exists in mankind. I mean, it's just who we are.
Yep. Human nature. Well, we hope that this podcast has been enlightening, maybe a little bit interesting. Again, as Bill said, we are by no means professionals in this. Feel free to do your own research and dive in as deep as you wish. However, we do caution, use caution in anything that you do, in any decision in life, and think about what you're doing before you just dive in.
When you're digging into things like this, definitely, depending on what you believe, what you don't believe, just
be respectful.
Be respectful and practice caution with things you don't understand.
Absolutely. Well, thanks once again for joining us for another episode on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Hey, this is Eric, and I just wanted to give a little reach out and a plug to our first paying sponsor for Nightmares on the Lost Highway. That's our little family toy and gaming shop here in Lebanon, Missouri called Raven's Loft. If you happen to be in the central Missouri area, please check us out. We have 2 locations. First one is at 223 West Commercial, downtown Lebanon. We've also branched out to a second location out at the Heartland Antique Mall, also here in Lebanon. You're going to find all kinds of vintage toys, Star Wars, Star Trek, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Mego, Universal Monsters, all types of gaming, board games, Magic the Gathering. So we would appreciate it if you'd stop by. You can like our Facebook page. Swing by and check us out. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Alex Tudor, who has been helping us a lot with our endeavors on this podcast.
You could call him our producer at this point, I think.
Our producer, electronic recording technician. He's the one that's setting up all the mics and the hardware in the background. And then Bill Weirs is going through, taking his time to try to clean and edit this up and give us the best possible version that we can present to you folks. Want to thank everybody involved with that.